your local television network, TSPN. And now back to Today's Seniors Living Well with your host, Lori Webb.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Today's Seniors Living Well. And we've had a great buffet of a program with Gwen Christensen talking about planning and Tanya talking about Lifeline, and just an absolutely inspiring interview with Neil Smith, who is who I want to be when I grow up, really. And the final segment of the show, we've been calling on our hospital friends to talk about a variety of services at the hospital. And Geraldine De Silva was here talking about the diabetics outpatient program, which is a fantastic program. Last week, you remember, Maureen Mooney Michaels was here talking about how to eat happily and healthy during the holidays. And my guest now is another Lori Britton. Thanks for coming this morning.
You're welcome.
She got called in kind of at the last minute, and she's got a little bit of leftover bronchitis, she said, so we're going to give her plenty of time to talk and tell a little about the program that you have at the hospital. You've been a nurse there for 7 years.
7 years.
But you've been a nurse for 25, you said.
Correct.
And you work in ICU.
Yes.
But we're not talking about ICU today. We're talking about another kind of program that the hospitals put on.
We started about 2.5 years ago, the Sac Sierra Health Region, which is the Sutter, all the Sutter hospitals in this region, including Sacramento and Roseville. They instituted a program. They took on an initiative over 2 years ago with funding from Gordon and Betty Moore. Gordon Moore founded Intel, and he and his wife decided to, instead of suing a hospital over a mistake that was made many years ago, they decided to put their money into a foundation, and they fund hospitals to improve nursing processes. So this plan is nursing driven, and I volunteered for it when I heard a speaker in Sacramento at a conference. It really piqued my interest. I have a couple of friends who are diabetic and a family member who's diabetic, and I thought it was really sound medicine, and so we started this, and the goal was to improve the outcomes in hospitalized patients, whether they're diabetic or not diabetic, and this is glycemic control, is basically the management of blood sugar in hospitalized patients.
So when someone like me who's a diabetic goes into the hospital, obviously there are impacts, but even for any patient that goes into the hospital?
For any patient.
Uh-huh.
When people are hospitalized, what happens is, your stress level goes up.
No kidding.
The amount of food you're eating or what you're eating changes. Sometimes they tell you to stop eating. Mm-hmm. And if you're diabetic, that can cause problems. Mm-hmm. And if you're on oral medications, they're likely now to stop your oral medications and start you on insulin. So we have a lot of diabetics who kind of get this scared look on their face when we come in with a needle and we say, we're going to give you some insulin. And they say, well, I don't take insulin. And we have to explain to them that while you're in the hospital, your blood sugar is going to probably be a lot higher than it usually is. We may put you on steroids depending on what your diagnosis is, and steroids will also increase the blood sugar, and sometimes they'll come into the emergency room with a blood sugar over 400.
Oh.
And what we used to do was we would, and even if they were like a new onset diabetic, we would teach them how to inject an orange. I don't know if you remember those days.
Yes, I do.
And we would put them on what we called a sliding scale. And basically what that meant was we would check their blood sugar, and then we would inject them with insulin based on what their blood sugar was. Mm-hmm. But we didn't take into account what they were eating. We didn't take into account whether or not they were taking in more carbs than they normally would. And so we found that we were chasing the blood sugar all over the place. We were chasing it up and we were chasing it down. And when you have those wide fluctuations up and down of your blood sugar, it causes a lot of other problems. Right now, and this is important in Amador County because we do have a disproportionate number of elderly people in Amador County compared to a lot of other places in California.
A third of our population.
And a third of newly diagnosed diabetics are actually greater than 65 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And by the year 2030, it's projected that approximately 1 in 3 people will likely be diabetic or pre-diabetic. So now, when someone comes into our emergency department or they're admitted for surgery, we like to have what we call an A1C on file. And if you've had an A1C drawn in the last 3 months, then we can use that number. And it's sort of, for people that aren't diabetics, it's sort of a tattletale number that gives us an indication of what your average daily blood glucose has been over about 2 to 3 months. And that gives us an indication of how well your pancreas is working. Some diabetics have a pancreas that doesn't work at all. Or they have a pancreas that's kind of sluggish and only works sometimes. So what we do with glycemic control is we pretty much become the pancreas. And this Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation funded us for the last 2 years, and I got together a team with Dr. Geraldine O'Shea and myself and our pharmacist at the hospital, Andre Peters. We put together, with help of the region, they put together order sets that cover diabetic ketoacidosis, hypoglycemia, subcutaneous insulin order sets, and we initiate those order sets when a patient has 2 blood glucoses over 180.
2 over 180?
And that's what this button means. This was my campaign button. When I started the process, I had to educate all the nurses in the hospital how to initiate the order set and convince the physicians. We had to teach the physicians to change the way they did things. And there was a learning curve. We're still working on it. And we've noticed just little changes over the last year. We've noticed that we're keeping our patients within a range. And Sutter Hospital here in Amador, we like to have our blood glucose be between 100 and 180. And I would rather see it under 150, but we're kind of taking baby steps in that direction.
You know, Lori, I'm a nurse and a diabetic, so I know what the effects of fluctuating and too high blood sugar can be in long term. But maybe you could talk a little bit about the problem with having blood sugars that are too high, all the systems that they affect.
Well, as most diabetics know this because they get it drilled into their head when they go through the process of learning about the disease. A lot of people are in denial. We have a lot of people that make appointments to see outpatient diabetes educators, and then they cancel those appointments. What happens if you have wide fluctuations over a period of time, and it doesn't take very long for it to happen, you're going to have vision problems, kidney problems. Diabetes is the 7th leading cause of death in this country, and it's a major cause of heart disease and stroke. And as you get older, diabetes can become more brittle, more difficult to manage. And over time, your pancreas pretty much slows down, I think, and it just stops working. And coming into the hospital for any other problem, and you have diabetes, it just exacerbates everything.
Exactly.
And our goal is to improve the outcomes and get people out of the hospital as quickly as possible.
And with a better understanding of of why they need to keep their blood sugars under 180.
Absolutely.
You brought, is this something that you give out to everybody, or?
We have an amazing inpatient and outpatient diabetes education department, and this is a survival kit. It basically it gives all the information you might want to know about diabetes as you're leaving the hospital, and they give you resources to join their support groups. We have a support group here.
It meets the fourth Thursday of every month.
Correct.
From 4:30 to 5, or 4 to 5:30, I think. But
Right.
they're not meeting this month. They're
Right.
skipping
this
December.
month.
Yeah. So now, is it only diabetics that get this, or is it people that you notice have high?
Well, some people come into the hospital and they have a high blood glucose because we're giving them medications that increase that. They're under a lot of stress. They're undergoing surgery, and so we don't usually give this to people that are having problems with their blood sugar while they're in the hospital.
Just situational.
Typically, we'll stop their medications, their oral medications, and then we'll treat them with insulin while they're in the hospital. And then when they get to the point where they're ready to go home, we restart their medications, and hopefully they never come back to see us again.
And I know that I feel a lot more confident about going into the hospital now as a diabetic, because I know I'll be very well taken care of. Lori, thank you so much for coming in. Lots
You
of
are very
information.
welcome.
All right, that's it for this week. Come back next week and we'll have more good things to talk about.
Today's Seniors Living Well was made possible in part by a generous contribution Board of Supervisors. Chairman of the Board, District 2 Supervisor Richard Forces of Amador City, Ione, and Comanche. District 3 Supervisor serving the eastern areas of the Upcountry. District 1 Supervisor in the Jackson area. District 4 Supervisor Louis Boyta Creek and Pine Grove. And District 5 Supervisor Brian Plymouth and the north area of western Amador County. So call 223-6470 or go to w.co.amador.ca.gov.